should be.
Good evening. I will call to order meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for our work session on Monday, October 16th at 5:01 p.m. And we'll start with review of agenda and items on consent. Do any of the councilors have any comments? Okay with the way it stands?
No comments.
Okay. Any councilor concerns?
Nope.
Okay. We'll move into our work session and start with the Transportation Performance Monitoring Report with Ms. Pepper. And colleagues.
Good evening, Mayor Fitzgerald and members of the council. Tonight I have with me Scott Manser and Jenna Bogart from DKS Associates, our city's transportation engineer, and they will be presenting to you tonight an update to our transportation performance report. So I will turn it over to Scott and will be available to answer any questions. But thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and City Council, we're excited to share our findings related to the Wilsonville Transportation Performance Monitoring Report and just give a little bit of a history of the performance monitoring and what got that started and how we got to where we are today. So Jen, if you go to the next slide. So the purpose of the performance monitoring report is to really help the city monitor and plan and help determine engineering efforts and leading to what your desired outcomes are. And for the performance monitoring, the history really goes back about 5 to 7 years ago when a portion of the city, we've been evaluating and monitoring traffic based on some traffic impact studies that were done for developments. And over a long period of time where no traffic counts were collected, we went and collected some new counts, and there was some significant regional growth on some of the city streets, which took the engineering and public works staff by surprise. And so that kind of started this process. And so this is the third round. Every 2 years we've been collecting data, both safety, and Jenna will go through a lot of the data that we've gone through and looking at the city's transportation goals. And so that's kind of a little history of what got us started to be monitoring and just making sure we want the city's streets to be working safe, to be providing the adequate capacity and meeting the expectations of the residents and the businesses within Wilsonville. So that's that second bullet. We've been tracking the impacts of regional transportation growth on Wilsonville streets, and also to make sure that the city's staying up with the incremental progress to provide safe streets, adding new streets where needed as the city grows, and to provide transportation infrastructure, especially for walking and biking. As my daughter was just turned 16, and she was doing her driving tests here in Wilsonville, and so I ended up driving a lot of the streets, and I was just amazed, and I was thankful that she was practicing in Wilsonville because she really got a lot of practice with people walking and biking and having to stop, and I could teach her that. And so that's really important, and you know that's important to the residents of Wilsonville, and which is kind of led with our performance monitoring. And as we move forward, and I'm going to pass it off to Jenna to talk a little bit about the goals and the monitoring that's been done to date.
Yeah, so there's each of the metrics in this report are tied to one of the city's 7 transportation goals, and so the next few slides I'll walk through a lot of those metrics. Most of them they're all in the report, but most of them we have highlighted in this presentation. So goal number 1 in the TSP is to provide a safe transportation network, and so we've taken a look at fatal and serious injury crashes in the city in the last 5 years. So this map on the right shows the crashes between 2016 and 2020, and we've kind of tracked the average rate of crashes in the city over kind of a rolling year period. And so in the last report that we did a couple of years ago, the average crashes per year was about 2.4 crashes per year, fatal and serious injuries. And then this performance report update, we were at about 2.6 crashes, so a little bit higher than the previous report. We saw a few more crashes kind of clustering around that Beckman Road and Canyon Creek intersection, as well as the Town Center Loop West and Wilsonville Road intersection. And so given what we were kind of seeing in the data, we would just recommend to the city to potentially work and consider working with the ODOT ARTS, the All Roads Transportation Safety Fund. There's a grant program that awards money to agencies to install safety improvements in their cities. They're just kicking off their current cycle, so they're just getting going on putting applications together. And so just something to consider for maybe that intersection at Town Center Loop West and Wilsonville Road.
As you go to the next slide, we'll be working with Amy and Zach just to make some recommendations to work with ODOT to put in for some of that free money, possibly for some of those high crash locations. But again, the city's goal would be to have no severe and fatal crashes, and we're going to continue to work with the engineering staff to move in that direction.
Goal number 2 in the TSP is to provide a connected and accessible transportation network. And so for this one, we've tracked the city's ped and bike facilities throughout the last couple of years. And since 2019, trying to highlight them, there's lots of busyness on these maps, but highlighting on these maps, there's an urban upgrade that occurred on Garden Acres Road that provided sidewalks and a 2-way cycle track in the last few years. Also a lot of infill, just sidewalk infill in those housing developments in Frog Pond and Villebois. There were also 3 rectangular rapid flashing beacons that were installed, 2 along Wilsonville Road and 1 in the town center area, those were built kind of between a combination of development money and city money. So same thing for bicycle facilities. We've seen a lot of improvements just kind of throughout all quadrants of the city. Bike lanes that were upgraded to buffered bike lanes on Wilsonville Road, so providing that extra space between people in the bike lane and the cars in the roadway. We saw that on Wilsonville Road, on Ellickson Road near Argyle Square Shopping Center, also on Town Center Loop West, and then there were some new bike lanes that were added on Boones Ferry Road. So there's just a lot of these kind of gaps that were filled in over the last few years in the bicycle network.
One additional project too was the recent Brown Road extension down by 5th and Old Town that just has provided the new connection across the railroad tracks and provide some additional bike, and that will probably show up in our next performance monitoring report, as that wasn't complete when this work was done.
Yes. And kind of leading into the bike and ped network, we also took a look at bike trips and walking trips within the city. And we pulled this trip data from a website called Replica. It takes a combination of like cell phone data and other roadway data, infrastructure, land use, transaction data, and creates this model of simulated trips throughout the city for all different modes for ped, bike, transit, motor vehicle, freight. And so we took that data from Replica and provided 2019, 2021, and 2022 trips. And we just kind of took a look at that short trend line there. And what we were kind of seeing is shown in that table there on the top right that shows that biking trips in Wilsonville kind of at large dropped between 2019 and 2021, but then we've recovered since then. 2021 to 2022, we saw like 1.5% or 150% increase in general. So trips dropped during that kind of COVID period, but have recovered since then and will continue to grow based on that trend line. For walking trips, we saw kind of a slight increase between 2019 and 2022, just throughout the city kind of at large, anywhere between 15 to 30% increase in walking trips. So based on that, what we were seeing there, just continue to recommend to the city to fill in sidewalk infill and invest in enhanced pedestrian crossings to find those bicycle gaps in the network and continue to connect those facilities together to provide continuous routes between schools and parks and employment centers, as well as like leveraging development projects when applicable to help build those improvements.
I have a question in goal 2. Sure. I love the idea of multimodal, first of all. It's great. And it makes sense in a lot of communities, but I see in Wilsonville 2 significant barriers. The traffic volume overall, especially during our rush hours, is competing with bikes, which is dangerous. But when I look at, on page 13 of the council report, what I see, in the multimodal connectivity slide, what I see is you're also discussing bike lanes on Kinsman and on 95th and on portions of 2s, which are, receive heavy semi-traffic, and particularly on the west side. So the bikes would be competing with large commercial traffic, especially semis.
Yep.
How do you account for accommodating both bikes and semis in that same area?
Yep. So a good example will be in the future up at Garden Acres, where that's going to have some industrial traffic, and really it is to create a protected bikeway. And engineering is coming up with a lot of creative ways to protect bikes by moving them off of the roadway.
Okay.
And having like a cycle track or a multi-use path. And so on those streets with high industrial traffic, you're going to start seeing the design change from on-street bike lanes to more of the protected bikeways.
You know, great, thank you.
Yes.
Sure.
I notice on your slide that's currently up that you have 5 zones that have been assessed for biking trips and walking trips, but nothing in Charbonneau. Was any assessment during our transportation report done in Charbonneau?
Yes, I did pull the data from Charbonneau. It was just a lot lower in trip count, so it was kind of hard to pull some findings from it. Just the quantity of trips in that area were a lot lower, and so I'd be happy to share those findings though with you anyway, and you could take a look at them, but they were low certainty numbers, if that makes sense.
I'd be surprised because there are people walking all hours of the day, every day of the week. So I'm surprised that
So one thing
show up.
One thing to think about too is the data that we're using. A lot of it is cell phone related data. So if somebody's going on a walk and they take their cell phone with it, it's collecting that data, and that's where we're getting those pedestrian bike trips. And so with some of the data, if they're not taking cell phones, you're not going to see a lot of the data that may be in existence for what you're observing.
Yes, and a lot of the data from Replica is based on simulated trips that are between residential zones, retail centers, schools, employment centers. So if it's recreational, just kind of going out for a walk, this model doesn't capture those types of trips. It's mostly trips with kind of a purpose, if that makes sense. So a lot of those, this model isn't based on pure actual activity. It's based on a simulated activity, if that makes sense.
And that brings up a follow-up comment. I'm really glad you brought that up, because if you look at the residential statistics on page 9 of our packet, it shows 25% of our population is over the age of 50. So you've got a significant segment of the population that may not necessarily be riding bikes. Some of us do, but to be very realistic, bike ridership, and to separate recreational bike riding from bike riding that would be used as true transportation, to go to the grocery store or to run to Walgreens or to go visit, a friend with a destination, rather than let's just go on a bike ride. Yeah.
So would it be possible to add an explanatory note in this report that describes that this data is representing, as you described it, as not representing some types of pedestrian activity?
Yeah, certainly.
And we'd be happy to provide the Charbonneau data as well.
Okay. So we could add that to the report?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then just with an explanatory note.
Do both, like what Julie, the mayor just said?
Yes. Absolutely.
So TSP goal number 3 is to provide a functional and reliable transportation network. So to track that, we've collected vehicle volume data throughout the city at key roadways, key intersections. We've also taken a look at average vehicle delay at those intersections that are shown in the map there on the right, as well as looking at vehicle travel times on your city arterials and freight routes. And in general, some of the kind of key findings we took away from that data evaluation was that today, traffic volumes are about 7% lower compared to 2019 volumes. A result of post-pandemic work schedules, kind of a hybrid schedule that's become a lot more prominent in a lot of working employment centers. And so that resulted in the reduced average vehicle delay at those key intersections. We saw reduced travel times on a lot of those key arterials and freight routes, as well as vehicle miles traveled, reduction in that metric as well on city streets.
So I have a comment on that. Is that compared to other cities or the region, is that a significant change?
I'd say it's pretty comparable with
Yes.
other cities
Okay.
that we're seeing in the metro area, yes.
So it's right in the middle. We've been seeing around 5 to 10% reduction at this point, and you're right in the middle of that.
Especially on the local streets, yes.
Thank you.
The one place we did see an increased number of vehicles was between Wilsonville and the Willamette Valley to the south. So if you think like between Salem and Wilsonville, Woodburn and Wilsonville, there was a slight positive trend of volume increase on those I-5 ramps kind of at Wilsonville Road. That was one thing that stuck out. We also looked at the 24-hour volume profile on a couple of the key arterials in the city, and especially near Day Road, we were seeing a kind of a spreading out of that peak traffic into the 3 to 4 hour near Day Road. Typically, we see kind of that intense peaking between 4 and 6, but there was some spreading out of that peak in that area of the city.
It was mainly in that northern area where you have a lot more industrial and work shifts that tend to be a little bit earlier than typical office-related 4 to 6 p.m. job time period.
Yep. So TSP goal number 4 is to provide cost-effective transportation infrastructure. For this one, we have in the past taken a look at the pavement conditions on the city's collector and arterial streets. We did not update that metric for this performance update. It tends to not change very much from update to update, so we've decided to take a look at it again in the next performance update. But the recommended actions still stand to just continue to survey the streets inventory and the pavement condition, and to partner with private development to fund those street pavement repairs when applicable. TSP goal 5 is to provide compatible street network that is consistent with the city's standards for street design. There's just a few streets that are needing urban upgrades to meet those city standards, and there's stretches along Boone's Ferry, includes Brown Road, Ritter Road up in the north area of the city. There's opportunities to work with developments along those, some of those roadways like Day Road, Parkway Avenue, and Beckman Road to help fund those street improvements, to build the half street improvements, make those streets built out to what they should be per the city's TSP. So whether that's including center turn lanes or sidewalks and bike lanes, things like that.
Yeah, the city's transportation system plan does a good job of identifying what streets do not meet current standards, and engineering is working hard to get those leveraged through development as they move forward, as well as their capital improvement program.
TSP goal number 6 is to provide robust mode share, and so we've taken a look at the last 5 rounds of the National Citizen Survey, which provides results from the citizens' perceptions of ease of using different mode share in Wilsonville. And so just in the last 2 rounds of those surveys, we've seen an increase in positive responses from citizens regarding the ease of use of biking, taking transit, and driving around the city. And the one mode share that did see a slight decrease in the last couple of rounds of that surveys were ease of walking. And so the recommended actions here for the city is to just continue to build those bike and ped facilities to meet to accommodate people of all ages and abilities. So not just providing those facilities, but also making sure that they're comfortable for school-age children, for elderly people, for people with disabilities, and making sure that we can increase that positive response from the citizens.
I have a question on this one, and some of the earlier points. I think there was an article or letter to the editor, to the Oregonian this weekend, and also some articles in the national media recently about increases in pedestrian accidents or with vehicles related to an increase in larger, taller vehicles, so it's harder to see pedestrians with some of the vehicles that people want are much bigger than the average in prior years. Do you have any feedback on that and how cities can account for that?
Do you know if that was like truck related or just?
SUVs and trucks,
Okay.
Those large vehicles that just sit way higher than maybe 10 years ago, the average is what is being inferred.
Yeah. And I haven't heard that as a new trend, but I haven't seen those articles, but there's always been a trend for trucks and being up higher and not seeing bikes, especially when they're making right turns at intersections. And that's why we're moving towards a lot of newer protected intersections that are moving the bikes away from the traffic and also putting them adjacent to the crosswalks. You're going to start seeing a lot of different design components for bicycle lanes adjacent to motor vehicle lanes. But yeah, that's something we've been working on design standards for about 10 years and trying to improve that.
Thanks.
Okay, so the last TSP goal is about promoting livability in the city of Wilsonville through the transportation network. And again, we pulled a couple of those questions from the National Citizen Survey and took a closer look at those. We did notice that there was a notable decrease in positive satisfaction with the sidewalk maintenance in the city of Wilsonville in the last 2 rounds of those surveys. And then the other metric we looked at was healthy lifestyle options within the city of Wilsonville, so providing trails and parks and other programs that encourage fitness and healthy lifestyles. We did not see really a notable change in people's positive perception of those. So again, I think this one, we had a kind of question from Councilor Akval about this one and why we thought that that decrease was pretty notable. And we're working with city staff to kind of nail down and look at it closer, but unfortunately this data didn't provide like location-based information or why that the satisfaction was lower than years past, but we will continue to kind of dig into that and see if we can find a reason for that.
You called out sidewalk maintenance, but it appears that it has decreased, confidence has decreased overall.
Yes, yeah, the positive feelings about it have decreased, yes. So that 65% is the percent of people that would say that the sidewalk maintenance is excellent or good in Wilsonville.
That's hard because I know the city's been investing quite a bit of funds into upgrading ADA ramps and adding sidewalk infill and making improved connectivity with trails and other sidewalk infill. So the city has been moving in that direction. So to me, it's a little puzzling why it is, but it's something we'll be talking with.
Has the city collected any particular, individual complaints that would point to what sidewalks people might, has that changed, do you know?
No, I'm not aware of any new complaints. No.
Okay.
My initial look at this is based on the timing is that during the pandemic, people tended to be out walking their neighborhoods a lot more and may have noticed more sidewalk defects than they had previously noted, but that's just kind of an assumption that I'm making based on how I dealt with the pandemic and got outside when I could and what things I noticed that I never noticed before.
So that was the last of those TSP goals and those metrics. We're happy to circle back and answer questions about any of the content.
Any other comments, counselors? If not, we can go on to the next item. And so you'll bring this back to us with some of this other information or update the report?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I do have a question, and
Okay.
maybe this is more of my own perception, and you can square me on how you all report it, but when I think of our suburbs, particularly like Wilsonville, in our cities, they're actually designed for single-owner operated vehicles. And so we're sort of backfilling. And unlike our friends like in New York City and Europe, where you've got small local markets where you can go shop at every day, that just doesn't exist here. So if we have these large supermarkets and they're designed for larger volume purchases, you don't go to the market every day, you're not going to make daily trips typically for fresh food to cook for that night and maybe the next evening. That seems to me in and of itself, because there's always a last mile issue if you're taking public transportation. And if you're taking a bike, you're prohibited or limited just by what do you carry on a bike? And particularly with walking, how do you carry all of that? How do you get beyond that and still move to a multimodal transportation model for a city like Wilsonville?
Good question.
I wish I had a great answer right now. I think a lot of it has to do with the providing, be able to do a week's worth of shopping on transit may make it more challenging, but I think making it as easy as possible. And I'm really excited about some of the mixed-use development adjacent to some of your transit hubs that the city's looking at the transit area off of Barber. But those are the types of developments to make it easier and more accessible to those commercial uses from transit. And I think, that last mile that you're talking about, having easy pedestrian connections, having enhanced pedestrian crossings, having sidewalks and bike facilities that make that final connection would be where the investment would need to be to provide access to those services more.
So as you think forward on, I appreciate all of these goals, are you weaving that into your goals about solving that last mile? Because I see that could be the ultimate impediment for anyone using multimodal transportation. Will you?
Would that be more of the transportation system plan?
Yeah, definitely that's part of it, but I think, that last mile question is something that we can think more about and come back to share some of those ideas.
I think there's some transit opportunities there as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I just have a question about the data. In preparing this report, was any actual data collected, or was it other databases that were used to come up with responses to the goals?
Yeah, so we collected a significant amount of new counts where we set up video cameras and collected motor vehicles, trucks, pedestrian, and bikes. But so that was multiple locations throughout the city that we actually collected the data. But when we were looking at growth, we don't have a lot of historical data for pedestrians and bikes. And so the data that Jenna was referring to, the replica data, that was some supplemental data to other counts that we collected all over the city.
Crash data was new.
Correct, yes, yeah, crash data was new, our truck, our motor vehicle, our pedestrian bikes at specific strategic locations throughout the city, that was all new collected data. But the replica data we can use, and we can actually compare it from today and years in the past where we didn't have any data collected at other locations.
So getting to the section where we're looking at roads that have, all I can remember is the yellow lines on them where that's increased.
Yes.
I'd have to go back to the exact page. But was that actual data that was collected to get to the areas? Go to the recommendations for that section, I think it was. No, it's in the next one, I believe. Yeah, where it talks about the specific roads where they're, go back one slide, please.
Oh, on this one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this one, I think, was the upgrades on the road. There was a slide that looked at, this one says no new data was collected for this update.
As far as the data on this one, we were just comparing existing facilities to what your new standards are and identifying where there were gaps in the system.
It's under goal 3, and it's page 18 on our council report, where it talks about travel time reliability and the yellow areas that look at like Wilsonville Road, what looks like 95th, Ellickson Road. I thought there was a discussion about Day Road being included in that. Were those actual data collected, or was that where did those data come from?
That travel time data was from a database called INRIX, which is based on GPS, crowdsourced GPS data. So that's pulling data from people's cell phones and other GPS-based devices. So that one is based, and then that data is from current year. So I think either 2022 or 2023, I believe. So that is updated and new and based on current travel patterns and current driver behavior that's occurring today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate all of that. And we will now go to the Community Service Block Master Plan update. And I wanted to let the council and also our speakers and guests know that I have an event I'm going to participate in across the street at the library briefly, so I'm going to be stepping out for half an hour at about 6:25. And Councilor Linville, you could moderate while I'm out there.
Thank you.
Or if you would, please. Thank you.
All right. While she's getting the PowerPoint up and running, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Delora Kerber, Public Works Director. And with me tonight is our consultants from FFA Architecture and Interiors, Christine Rumi, sorry. Rumi, all right, got it. And then Ian Gilbert and Troy Ainsworth, who's in the back there. And we're here this evening to update you on the Community Service Block Master Plan project and get some validation we are proceeding in the correct direction for this project. We'll make our presentations and then take some questions at the end. So the area that we call the Community Service Block Master Plan is the 5+ acre site there on the intersection of Wilsonville Road and Town Center Loop East. It's where the current Police Public Works Building, the Community Center, and the Art Tech Building are currently located. The intent of this project is to assess customer needs for both the police and the community center programs and develop conceptual designs, a master plan that would strategically help us meet the current and future needs for our community. So tonight we're presenting some potential programming for both the police and the community department and the community center. And with that, so how did we get here today? Well, first we convened an internal stakeholder group that include members from police, parks and recreation, planning, economic development, transit, city administration, and public works. Pretty much all the departments except the library. So, but we could include them so they wouldn't feel lonely. Anyway, so this collection of staff best understands the requirements of the community, and based on their experience, they are able to bring to the table the perspective of our customers or our community members as to what would be helpful for this project. So the first thing, one of the first things that we did is we convened a workshop for sustainability. And during this workshop, we discussed foundational, target and aspirational goals, such as, do we want a green building? What about the site context, the placement of the structures? There was all these various elements that we looked at. And at the end of the day, we came up with these various themes. And these themes will be something that we will refer to as we go through the development of this project. Everybody agreed that durability and longevity of whatever it is that we construct will make sense. Wanting to make sure it's resilient, so if earthquake happens or any other natural disaster or man-made disaster for that matter, where the various facilities will be resilient. We spend a lot of time talks about flexibility, multi-use. How could we use one space and then reuse it to do something else? Everybody liked the idea of renewables as well as the stewardship of the land and the environment. The next workshop that we had convened with the group was visioning. So this was setting what is our vision of this master plan for this community service site, and to help us meet the needs for the future. And as we were talking about the goals that we ended up with, everybody agreed, wanted to make sure it was a great community amenity, as well as it was innovative and had some, the appropriate technology, and just how we approached it just wasn't just cookie cutter. It was something that was going to be, really interesting. Wanted to make sure it was inclusive, that definitely everybody in the community would enjoy coming to this facility or these facilities or the whole block, the block as a whole, and making it tailor-made for the users, be it internal or external customer users, making sure that it was going to fit their needs. And again, back to the flexibility, making sure it's flexible and adaptable in whatever we do. So then after our visioning goals, we took tours of other facilities around the region. And we visited 3 different facilities for each. For police, we went to the Oregon City Public Safety Building, the top row, the TriMet Transit facility, the middle row, and the bottom row was the Beaverton. And during these opportunities, we were able to talk with the staff at each of these locations and have a conversation about what worked well, what didn't work well, what kind of programs do you offer to your customers? Because then that way we could take that information and use it in ours. In fact, this one of the things is after visiting the Oregon City Public Safety Building, the idea came back, and we had taken it to this next step, is integrating the council chambers and court into the police building, which we thought made a lot of sense, because if we had done something like that, you're able then to incorporate some safety. You can bring forward the community, getting the community more involved with the police department. And then also, if we were to do something like that, you could take this room and reconfigure it into other workspace for City Hall, at thinking about the future growth of City Hall, of not having to expand the building, but you could repurpose different parts of the building. And so then we also went to the 3 different community centers. We went to the Portland Southwest Community Center, the Hidden Creek Community Center that was for Beaverton, and then the Sherwood Center for the Arts. Again, we were able to take away, some key takeaways were the use of natural lights. Everybody really likes that. Having multi-use space, and yet also focusing on that maybe sometimes it's appropriate to have a dedicated space, such like an art studio, right? So you don't always have to clean up your art tools and put them away. So that type of thing. How we could screen or interact with adjacent properties was another one. And the one element that kept coming back again and again and again is storage. Have storage, and even when you think you have enough storage, add some more. That is the message we kept getting from the other staff members at these other ones. So these tours really helped the team understand how other agencies were operating, discovering what programs that they might be offering to their customers that we're not currently, and maybe that we would want to, and basically letting us know what we didn't know, and how it could be beneficial to our community to be able to incorporate things that we learned on these. So I think that was it for that portion, and now I'm going to pass it off to Christine and Ian, who'll take you through the facility assessment and programming results.
Oh, excuse me, before we go forward, I wanted to thank the counselors who went on some of those tours
Yes.
also, and I believe that that Hidden Creek facility was Hillsborough.
Oh, Hillsborough, oh, yes,
Right.
you're correct.
And I also wanted to ask the counselors, as we talk about this, to think about our goals and values and how you see this reflected in some of the observations as we go forward, because we are at the beginning of this. And also, some of the counselors have already toured the community block, and if some of them have not been able to, I would encourage them to still do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Ian Gilbert. I'm a partner with FFA Architecture Interiors. It's great to be here this evening in front of you to give you an update on this project. What I want to go through first is just an assessment that was done of the existing police station and public works facility, or soon to just be police station. I think what is often the case with a facility of this age, it usually was not built for the purpose of being a police station. And that's reflected in multiple ways throughout the facility, both in how it's positioned on the site, how the spaces and how they're used, and just lots of people make do with what they can. So specifically, obviously one of the biggest concerns in our area, and has been for the last probably 20 years, is just the seismic strength of any facility, particular ones needed for essential facilities. This facility won't do well in a earthquake, just as bluntly as I can put it. And you really need it to, because of the services that it houses. In addition to that, its position, it's kind of on a very important corner for the city of Wilsonville, given the kind of key streets that sort of cross right there, as well as the park across the street. That center image in the images in front of you, that's a secure parking lot, and that faces that corner. And in a police station, the secure parking lot is where you kind of don't want all eyes on it necessarily. And so that position, as well as the overall town center master plan goals of holding the corner with the building, this building really doesn't do that. In addition to that, there's just general code compliance issues, energy code, anything that we do to the building in terms of modernization or trying to renovate it means that the whole building needs to be brought up to current codes, and that's not a small endeavor necessarily.
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe I missed it, but what year was the building built?
Laura, can you
I
help
want
me
to
with
say
that?
maybe around 88, but that's a guess.
It's been a while.
Well, let's see, how long has the city been incorporated? It used to be, it was the original city hall, so.
1968.
70s.
Lastly, it's just frankly too small. And when we start talking about the programming effort that we went to and assessing what was really needed for a new police station, or just a police station that's sized for your community, you quickly realize that even taking up the whole facility versus just the bottom floor won't really be enough to meet the goals of the exercise.
Do you want to talk about the evidence?
Yes, I can talk about the evidence, sorry. So in addition to the space constraints, the way that police stations should function, there are pretty key workflows that need to happen, specifically how you deal with suspects, how you deal with evidence. It's really sort of important consideration. And also what you do, provide space for staff when they're not, on duty necessarily, or when they're coming in from shift. And so the space on the left is, center left, is the locker room. That's pretty small, doesn't really accommodate the needs. Shower facilities are across the hall. That's sort of not necessarily ideal. The image in the upper center, that is where staff is processing evidence, or at least trying to. There's not enough room really to lay that out. Often you'll get a bag of something from a suspect, and you need space to spread that out, be able to catalog it, process it, and put it in a locker for it to be hauled off to the county facilities. And there's not enough space for that to happen. So often it happens on the adjacent photo, which is often where the officers have to eat their lunch. And those two things are not necessarily ideal functions to mix. And so inevitably it becomes a staff health issue as well as just good sort of workflow process. In designing a new evidence processing area, we have ventilation controls, we have other types of things because of the things that can be found that are hazardous to staff's health. And then lastly, just getting back to that size and space, the center right is what is a little bit of their break room and other functions sort of mashed together. And because of the size of that space, again, they're back eating lunch in their center kind of conference space on a regular basis.
I think if you tried to put together a collage of photos of what not to do with a police station or police department, public safety, this would probably be award-winning.
Yeah.
After, I did participate in the tours, and I have also toured the current police station. And the stark delta between the two is pretty stunning. Considering that we do have one of our highest and most important responsibilities to our city is public safety, that I do believe that this should be a priority. Not even talking about the overall impact on the officers themselves, because I can't imagine that this would be your choice of where you would want to be spending all of your time. And then also, I would say the distance to get to the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office for evidence disposal or evidence, all of that is also taking time away when we don't have many officers on the road. And I may be speaking out of turn here. I see the chief back there, so you can nod if you agree or not. But every time an officer has to take evidence to the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, that is one less officer who's available to handle emergencies or calls here in Wilsonville. Good? Okay. That's a yeah. So I consider this a high priority for our goals in council.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and also when we toured, there is a stark contrast. Well said. The job of being in law enforcement is really stressful, and when you do have an opportunity for a break in your day, it'd be nice to have it be a place that has some daylight. Maybe we saw the other more model facilities that had a decent exercise facility, just more personal space, uplifting space. I think we saw one example that wasn't a good example. And so that was a good tour to give us a broad range of bad to good to very good. Thanks.
So, as Delora said, we also have the community center as part of the scope of this master plan. And so we also evaluated the community center, the existing community center on the block. And what we found is that this building was purpose-built for community services or for community use when it was originally built. And it has, over time, been trying to keep pace with the growing community and growing services and programs they want to offer. But it is getting to the point where it's becoming difficult to continue to do that. There's a lot of multi-purpose spaces that are happening with things, particularly within the multi-purpose hall itself, where they serve meals at, which is this little room right here, although what you're seeing is storage, where they're serving meals to seniors. They are having exercise classes. They are doing maybe indoor soccer for little kids. I mean, things that are happening that you might want to have
there's a lot of flexibility that should be built into all these spaces, but there comes a point when too much flexibility is maybe detrimental to the space itself. So as Dolores said, storage is also of high priority in these spaces, and they have done a lot to try to make do with storing chairs and tables within their multipurpose space, creating additional spaces outside the confines of the original or added on to building in order to create some additional storage. And then, trying to multi-purpose things that really do need to be specific use spaces, like their kitchen facilities, their food storage facilities, their laundry facilities, and office space. This picture down in the lower center is an example of that, where in this space we've got the cooler and the freezer, which you see on the left. We've got laundry facilities on the right. There's some workspaces behind us from the picture taking standpoint, and some additional storage down the side for different provisions and things that are needed in the kitchen. So all of those things sort of combine to start to make things difficult as they try to continue to grow their programs and meet the needs of the community.
With a much larger population than we had when those were built.
Exactly. Additionally, there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done on that building. The siding is worn and is likely in need of replacement. The windows are also getting to the point where they need to be upgraded in some degree or repaired. And the mechanical system has also been slated as something for upgrading or repair. And that has a cost estimate of about $1.3 million on its own. So those are all things that we're trying to look at and consider when we see a building like this, and also understanding where the community wants to go and what would best serve its needs.
So as we were starting, so that's kind of the background of what we had. And then the next phase was having interviews with the staff and talking about, based on what you know, from what your customer needs are, is what is it that you would envision that you would want your facility to be and the services to provide. And so as we were going through these exercises, there was numerous things that were put out on the table for consideration. And two of them that come to mind that were housing on this site, as well as potentially a daycare on the site. And as we went through this particular exercise, we had determined, based on the square footage of the site, plus the programming needs for police and police and community center, and then the need for the parking and the green space, that neither one of those other functions would really fit on this site. So we didn't take those forward, but I just wanted to let you know that we had taken them into consideration.
Could you just recap that again, please? The ones that did not
It was
pass?
housing,
Okay.
adding housing to the
Oh, we did
site,
talk
or
about-
adding daycare.
Neither of those. Okay, so that has to be somewhere else. Okay.
So you're proposing that you would cite the community center and the police department in the same, on the same corner?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Is it the same corner or someplace in that block?
Well, so the corner, which is the 5 acres, that is where the current community center is, the current police department, and then you have the Art Tech building, and then the recently demolished Kiva building.
So I just meant it's not the one corner, it's that whole big block. Okay.
Yeah, right.
You said 5 acres?
Yes, little over 5 acres.
Okay, so through that process of having those interviews and those conversations, using sort of our kind of understanding of industry best practices based on sort of program sizes and things like that, we developed both a list of spaces, which we call a building program, that basically is a list plus a size, as well as what was called an adjacency diagram. And that's a fancy term for basically saying what needs to be next to what. And so these diagrams that are in front of you are kind of a combination of both. The individual blocks with the lines, that's the adjacency diagram. It's not a floor plan per se, but it is sort of a guiding principle as we start to fit these buildings on the site and how they want to relate to each other. So what's in front of you right now is for the police department. The total square footage that we're targeting, which includes the council chamber courtroom idea, is around 25,000 square feet.
I have a question on that.
Yep.
I'm not good at estimating what that looks like.
Sure.
Can you compare that to this space?
Compare it to the existing building, so the...
Or even this room here?
Did you know the square footage of the room? You can count ceiling tiles.
75 by 30.
Public Works PD building in total, I compare it to that.
Okay, that's 8,000. So the PD Public Works building currently as it sits is 8,000 square feet, 4,000, 4,000.
Okay.
Right. So if you were to try to take the same function that we've planned for here and keep it in that existing building, you'd be woefully short.
So if, just, again, thank you for the square footage, because it's like, okay, because I was on the tours, I can snapshot what the, say, for instance, comparatively to the size of the Oregon City Police Station
Right.
and Police Department and public, I'm not sure what you call this. Is this public service building?
Or public safety.
Public safety building? Would you say this is comparative in square footage in what you're proposing here?
So Oregon City is about 34,000 square feet compared to 25,000 square feet is what we're proposing here.
And they have far more staff.
They do, and yet by the same token, Wilsonville is growing. And the other thing I'd like to call out is that Oregon City has the same, is also, their police facilities are also, or their officers are with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, as opposed to Beaverton, which actually operates as its own police department, as opposed to being.
I think Oregon City has their own standalone PD. I think that distinction is important, though, Councilor Dunwell, in that when we're thinking about our police station, a lot of the stuff that modern police facilities and standalone departments have, you won't necessarily
That's right.
need here. So we need to be mindful of that.
That's
as we're
right.
So I
designing our
believe
police
Oregon City does not have the model we have.
No, they have their own standalone PD, so they would need an a pretty
They do,
good-sized evidence room. They would need maybe a carport. So, and Rob could speak to this probably better than I.
They'll need a full records department.
So Rob, can we get it on record and you could, because it is an important point that I think that we need to make the distinction.
Yes.
We have so much of the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the key features is, like you said, the property room. Ours is like a satellite property room where we can do most things, but some things have to go to the large facility just because they're complicated. Weapons, drug testing, there's a specific machine, all those type of things. And then probably one of the biggest square footage things is the records department. That's done by the sheriff's office, so we don't have a need for that. And that's actually typically a pretty large area for a police department is the records department.
So while we have you on a speaker,
Yeah.
could you just prioritize, and maybe this is not fair to ask you at this point, prioritize your top 3 needs that are not being met under the current station?
Other than sunlight.
Yeah, other than sunlight, right, and oxygen.
And seismic, right.
At least,
Really just space, right? Because like I've shown many of you, like our mental health clinicians just shoved into a corner, and the best we could do is put up some dividers. But there's some very private conversations that happen there that have confidentiality attached and medical things. So right now, we're not set up well for that. So she really needs her own space where she can have private conversations. And interview room's another one. I'm probably going to go more than 3, but
Fine, go ahead.
and then where we separate those spaces, as they pointed out, where we're mixing eating with evidence processing and everything else we do in one space. So really the space to have individual private spaces where you can accomplish your tasks that you're assigned and be mindful of all the confidentiality and privacy that goes with some of that things. I worry about the lobby where all the private information and reporting of really bad things in your life, or that might have to do with children, is extremely public. We try to make it as private as we can, but we don't have a lot of options. And so what you're seeing trending now, and they haven't hit on it yet, but is that there's usually they're building small private interview spaces right off the lobby so that when someone comes in with such a private matter, they're able to go into that room and discuss it privately and have
Great.
privacy and dignity.
and one other thing that struck me in a couple of the tour sites was the value of, if you will, call it community policing, and developing that important positive rapport with the community and the police staff, so that people can see their police officers and make it more appealing to join our police force. I think we are pretty appealing, as I hear this is one of the favorite places to work, but in our society, deepening those ties is good. And also, I heard about finding the importance of developing a separate entrance for someone who is coming with a report, somebody who may be a victim. And there is, at some of these other police sites, a separate entrance for somebody on the other side of that. So you're not bumping into the person that you're coming to report.
Correct, yeah. To me, it's all about giving the community the best service we can, providing the privacy and dignity, and being a place that they can be proud of.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So one other just sort of aspect of this overall process is a gap analysis, where we'll do those comparisons between what we're proposing here and other sort of similar facilities and similar communities and agencies. So that's still coming. A couple of key points I want to point out on this adjacency diagram. There's a strong red line that sort of crosses horizontally midway through the diagram. Thank you, Christine.
Mouse over it.
That represents a secure line. So everything up sheet from that is really open to the public, and the ability for the public to engage there, have community meetings, trainings at times, but there's a real clear line between where the officers are and the public is. And that's a really important aspect of safety and security, as well as confidentiality and performance. As the chief mentioned, you're very careful about how people come to the facility in terms of the types of people who are coming into the facility through the front door. You want to encourage people to come from the public and recognize that often people are coming there on the worst day of their lives. And you have to acknowledge that in terms of the types of spaces that you create, the privacy that you give, and how you help kind of people de-stress through that sort of sequence, and then get them the help that they need. And so that's a really key consideration as you're sort of planning an overall facility. A couple of other kind of key aspects. We discussed the council and court chamber. This is a very similar model to what's in Oregon City. If you haven't toured there, I highly recommend that you do. I know many of you have. In addition to that, the training room, the community room, that can double, sort of have two functions that way. It could be used for training, it could be used for incident command should you need it, but it also then can function as a community meeting space. Again, encouraging the people to come. If the Boy Scouts are meeting there, the Girl Scouts are meeting there, that repetition of, oh, I'm coming to the police station, that becomes not a scary thing necessarily. Behind that secure line, then you have really key functions that you don't currently have. You have a dedicated break room, you have dedicated fitness room, all with access to daylight and outside and things that people need when they're working in a stressful job, as well as a sally port. Sally port is kind of a secure garage where you bring somebody in. If you have a suspect, you bring them in, you close the doors, they get out of the car, and you move them to into a holding cell. And then functional lockers, locker facilities that aren't as scary as maybe what's there now, as well as just growth. Space for people to expand, grow into. It's really kind of needed for them to do their work functionally. And then this is an example of where all that square footage is based from, is that after the conversations with each individual staff member, we then sort of lay out each individual space, so we have a basis for that square footage number. It's not just, oh, I think it's going to be about this much. We base it on other projects that we've done, other facilities that we've seen. Hey, we need this many workstations. These workstations should be about like this, and then that becomes the basis for the square footage numbers that you're seeing.
Maybe explain the white to the right.
Right. So understanding that any new facility is an investment, right? You want to get the maximum longevity out of that investment. So whenever we're designing a facility, we're thinking about short-term and long-term growth. And so the areas that you see that are not colored in on that diagram, those represent sort of growth areas that we've already anticipated for inside the building. And then when we come back to you, we will have done some studies of these buildings on the site, and we will place those buildings as much as possible to plan for that future growth so that you can add on to them in the future and not lose your current investment that you're making here.
So then, moving on to the community center, a lot of all of the same principles that Ian just shared about what our programming documents are trying to convey and how we arrived at them are the same for this, for the community center. We issued questionnaires, we held interviews, and in addition to touring the spaces and looking at their existing spaces, we were able to come to an adjacency diagram like this one and a program list like the one that Ian had described for the police station that leads us to this point. So our existing building is around 10,000 or so square feet. And it has a couple of classrooms, it has a multi-purpose space, a sunroom that can be used for a variety of things, has a kitchen that serves the needs of the Meals on Wheels program, as well as some office spaces and a small fitness center. In our interviews, what we learned was that there's a lot of desire and need for some additional spaces to serve community needs. And some of those spaces are represented, all of those spaces are represented on here. Probably the largest is a gymnasium space. This is a single court gym that we've planned for in this project. And then it's also supported with a fitness space and another fitness studio for additional classes and exercise needs. And then combined with that, storage to serve those. That is probably the biggest new element that is being considered for the community center and represents a fairly large portion of the square footage that we are anticipating for this type of facility. Additionally, we've got a teen lounge, which is something that isn't currently part of the existing program. It gives the kids of the community, a place to go to be interactive with each other, and then, but also having like a home base if they need to after school or before school. And then additional of two, right now there's 2 classrooms, so there would be an additional classroom and a dedicated art space. Those are also new additions to the program. There already is an event hall for the current building, but this new event hall would have the ability to serve other purposes, like have potentially a performance component with a stage that could be brought out and used, still be used as the Meals on Wheels program, as well as be a rentable space for public events, and with a kitchen that can support it well, and a service delivery process that doesn't conflict with how the kitchen functions, which is currently the situation in their existing kitchen. And then finally, in terms of additional space that's being added, we have this space up here, which is a number of offices. Right now, the managerial staff at the community center is on site, but the administration for Parks and Rec is at the off-site facility, which is next to the town center park. And the goal here is to combine those offices in one place and start to free up some space at that other facility for future growth in both operations and other needs that might come from at that side. So what we end up with is around a 46,000 square foot facility compared to our 10,500 square foot facility, but this creates a more modern type of recreation and community center than what is currently on site.
So I have a question about the gym. Is that multi-purpose or is it a gymnasium floor?
It would be a gymnasium floor as we understand it to be at this point, but it could still be a multi-purpose type space. It could be used for other purposes if it needed to be. But we imagine that it would have, basketball hoops and, stripes on the floor in order to be useful as for leagues and things like that.
We used to have to cover our floor, our gym floor, if we had other events there. And so we had to put a big canvas cover over it if we were going to do some kind of an event. I don't know that we would really like to do that if we were going to use that space for other kinds of events. And the only reason I'm concerned about that is I'm thinking about specifically like out in Sherwood, where they have a large multi-purpose area where they could put booths, they could put, people milling around, food and beverages and a number of other things in a event space.
And I would say that the event hall, as you see there in the blue, that would be more that type of space. But the gymnasium would be multifunctional in basketball, soccer, little, whatever the little...
As a sport court.
Yeah, as a sport court. It wouldn't necessarily be opened up to be having other functions like that you're describing, because with the event hall, that area is larger than what we currently have. And so it'd be large enough to, maybe flip to the next.
I'm just concerned if that's a half court and that's represented in that green.
That's a whole court.
That's a full court.
Full court.
Oh, I thought you said it was a half court.
No, it was a single, what I meant by a single court, just, it was one full court as opposed to multiple full courts because.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I'm trying to get a sense of the dimensions of the event center to decide whether whether that in fact could be a real performance center.
So here, let's see, so what we're looking at is a 50 by 60 foot room for what we're calling the event hall.
Which is smaller than this room, correct?
No.
So this...
He's going to count the ceiling tiles.
In talking with what I understood there with the concept that we're seeing here is that is a pretty minimal stage and event space. It's not a theater with an orchestra pit. It's for moderate, small performances.
You're having a lecture, you're having, maybe a simple, not elaborate stage production.
It could be a singing type of thing, but it would not serve the purpose. Yeah.
Because I believe that we are pursuing a conversation with the high school, who does have a full-on performance arts center, as well as black box theaters.
Okay.
So just by way of comparison, this room is 34 feet by 54 feet.
Oh.
And what's being proposed is 50 foot by 60 foot.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's very
helps.
helpful. Yeah, that's very helpful. And then I have a question about going back to the previous one, but when you're finished with this one. So.
Oh, are there any other questions?
No.
About the community center?
So I'm wondering, I'm having, it's tiny here, but I'm thinking about the work that is done by the staff when we have, a celebration, like we have a reception when there's new council members, or we're celebrating whatever else. So we would want to not have staff have to bring on a cart from this building a coffee pot, whatever else over to that other building. So a small kitchen area would be very helpful and probably better than just a counter, so that they could be working during, not a big area, just a small prep area and storage so that whatever's used in that building could stay in that building.
We have anticipated your needs. In that the break, it says break only. It would be a break room. It would be a staging area to be able to bring in the food, probably have a microwave, maybe a sink type of thing, to be able to queue up the food. And then there's also what we call the conference room, which would be a location that staff or council members could retreat to and have your meals there in privacy and not have to have them at your dais, and then be able to come back out to, the public space and hold your meetings.
And so all the other, like the Planning Commission, DRB, and all of those functions would also go into this
They
facility?
could, yes, they could use this. Any function that is currently occurring in this room could occur in that other location.
One of the things, as long as we're on here, that I didn't say before, and I think you touched on it just briefly, but I think one of the things that strikes me about our current police facility is the lack of safety for our own officers. And even though by lock and key it's fairly secure, it appears secure, it's not. I mean, the minute you answer that door and someone comes in, you've lost all the security in that building, in that facility. So I think if we're talking about public safety as well, I think we need to talk about employee safety.
Of course.
That's really important. Also, I think we hold firearms, do we not, until they can get transported? Because they have to be kept in a separate facility then, is that not correct?
Right now, the only firearms we have are those of evidentiary nature that
Yes.
we may have seized from someone, so we'll do those temporarily till we can run in Dorgan City. And we do store some non-lethal weapons.
But don't those have to be separate than your other
Yeah, well,
evidence?
currently we have a safe dedicated just for those.
Okay.
And while you're here, just to confirm, I just wanted to clarify that we do have a locked lobby at the moment. People can't just walk through. They come in the front door, and that's as far as they can get. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can go downstairs and then they'd have to break through another door or window or something.
Okay.
But if they want to talk to you, you open the door and let them in.
Correct. Well, we can do some initial talk there's a front window that's fairly secure, but you're correct, after that, it's a door.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
One more question. Sorry. On average, how many trips per shift are your officers making in a week to Clackamas County Sheriff's Office in Oregon City?
Well, that's where the jail is too, so pretty much daily just for that purpose, and that's not something we're going to construct our way out of here, but for evidentiary purposes, probably less so. I'd probably go on a weekly basis,
Okay.
a few days a week, I think.
And I guess we'll talk about this in the next phase, and that is what kind of electronics capability there is, particularly for the police department. And I don't just mean with computers and report writing, but I mean for saving interviews and
That would be
interviewing.
That would be part of, if you're designing a building,
Right,
you would
next.
take that into
Right.
account.
Yep.
Thank you.
So as Ian alluded to, we are also doing a gap analysis to compare the programs that we've established for both the buildings with existing facilities in the surrounding area. So we're in the middle of that process right now, and we had prepared a matrix for each facility with different communities around the metro area and around the state that included demographics, growth projections, the types of facility they have, how old it is, and gave that to both the Parks Department as well as the Police Department and Delora and Martin in order to take a look and see what communities they wanted to be compared to. And they gave us that information, and then we went and looked at the plans for the facilities that were selected and compared the types of spaces they have to the types of spaces that we are proposing, taking into account the different types of programs that they might have. taking into account the relationship with Clackamas County, specifically for the police department, and the types of facilities that Parks has in all those different communities. So right now, we've got a draft of that that's currently out for review with our project managers, and then we'll take that forward and be able to present that information in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Maybe you've already gone over this, but what was the timeline looking like?
Oh, this is a good question. We've got our schedule here, so we can talk about what comes next and also give you an idea of where we are in the process. So this yellow triangle is today's council presentation. And all this kind of grayed out stuff is what we've done to date. So moving forward, we are going to finish our gap analysis and provide that out for review, as well as get started on our master planning and phasing portions of the work, which will include looking at how we site the buildings on the site, considering not just the buildings themselves, but the exterior portions, the site elements that need to be considered, like parking, like access, egress, landscape, elements that need to be there to meet building code or the development code, those types of things. Provide several options for that, so that when we can get to a preferred option, that will move forward into the concept design. We've got a survey, which is very useful to us, and we're starting to build that into the model so we can see how we deal with the site grade that there's quite a bit of, how we can have that work to our advantage on this particular project. So we'll be moving through that, and then also within this master planning phase is we'll be talking to and giving a similar presentation like this to the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Council, as well as the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
So once that initial master plan phasing work is done, and we have a general direction on sort of the massing and the site location, then we'll take the concepts that and the ideas that were brought forth earlier that Delora mentioned, both from sustainability and from visioning. We also have a community engagement meeting that's, which dot, Christine?
Actually, we don't have a dot yet for that because we want to determine with the city how best and where to position it.
Perfect. We'll take feedback from the community as well at that time and use all of that information to develop architectural strategies that meet the city's values, and then that becomes the basis for the conceptual design that we'll come back to you with at the end of the project.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to comment on the importance of the community input and feedback, talking to groups of all ages, including teens, middle school. What kinds of spaces do they have? Do they think they would use, and for what purposes? Appreciate that we're building all that in.
One quick follow-up question for you, though. You mentioned the gap analysis. I don't see an interim presentation of that analysis when it's complete to council.
I think that is to be determined if that's what we want to do.
Okay.
We had planned on.
So when it's complete, you'll go ahead and insert that into your project timeline?
Sure. We had planned for this council meeting as well as another one in the future to present the concept design. We can certainly present another, the gap analysis as well, if that is what we're, asked to do.
Great. Do we need that?
Well, we could at least have a summary in the next meeting.
And I think that's something that Delora and I could work on and present. I mean, I don't know that we need the architectural team to do that. I think that's something we can do.
Reference point.
I agree. Just provide it to us at some point as a reference point.
Absolutely.
I don't think you need to actually make a presentation, but if we can have it provided to us, that'd be great.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to step out for a library event and will ask Councilor Linville to please moderate the next presentation, which is the proposed updates to the solid waste franchise agreement and related administrative rules. And I've read the materials and will also watch the session.
Do you have any, you aren't leaving any comments or concerns? Okay. All right. So, thank you, Mayor. I will invite our city attorney, Amanda Guile-Hinman, and I believe our assistant city attorney, Stephanie Davidson, to present the staff report on the proposed updates to solid waste franchise agreement and related administrative rules.
I apologize, technical issues.
We all understand technical issues.
Okay, ready to go. Hi, everyone, city councilors. My name is Stephanie Davidson. I'm the assistant city attorney. We are here to continue the conversation that we had over the last couple of work sessions about the franchise agreement and the related administrative rules related to solid waste and recycling issues. So we have a very narrow goal today. Our hope is to explain some of the extensive red lines that you saw in Exhibit A to your staff report, make them a little bit more accessible, and then tie up the conversation around a couple of open items related to the franchise agreement, the annual report, and the language around electric vehicles, and any other issues that you'd like to consider before these documents are finalized. I just quickly wanted to go over some really, less substantive revisions that you'll see in your document. Things like, you'll see a lot of red lines in that Exhibit A. We tried to clean up the language. We took a holistic view at both the franchise agreement and administrative rules, tried to make sure those documents work well together, eliminated duplicative language, tried to improve the organization, things like that. So that's how to explain some of the red lines you'll see. And the rest of the presentation will focus on the more, changes to the structure of the document and the program, things like that. You've already seen this slide. This was the overview you received at the last work session. This is a high-level view of what the Recycle Plus program is and should be. So I'm going to skip past this slide really quickly and go on to the next, which contains more detail. But just keep your eye on that image. That'll come up in the next slide. This is essentially an on-call curbside residential service. I did learn tonight it can also potentially be a door collection service. So anyone who signs up for this service can potentially get collection at their door. Customers are responsible for subscribing for this service, and they have to pay an additional fee for that. Just a moment. I just received some information about that. My understanding is that the cost of this program is essentially identical from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There is a monthly base charge of $2.50 a month, and then depending on what type of collection service a person gets, that would be an additional, $9 to $15 per collection, I believe. That purple bin that you saw on the last slide, that is the collection bin that Republic Services provides to everybody who subscribes for this service. Customers are then required to source separate their materials. So, they'll be given some bags. They have to put their clothing and fabrics in one bag, other materials in different bags. One of the biggest challenges I think Republic Services faces in administering this program is making sure that they keep up with changing markets and they have a market for everything they collect. So that is an issue that they're seeing. And I just wanted to point out too, we wrote into, it's in section 8 of the administrative rules. You'll see it's all new text. We're saying that they may offer this service to multifamily customers, although I understand that they're currently testing how they can do that. There are some logistical issues with that, but we're giving them the option. So before I move on to other parts of the administrative rules, do any of you have any questions about the Recycle Plus program?
Counselors?
No.
No.
Okay. Oh, and I think this was mentioned before, but adding this to the franchise agreement is important to allowing Republic Services to maintain their exclusive franchise. So this is, and there's a huge customer demand for this service, so that's part of why this language is being added now. So shifting gears a little bit, I think we did mention this at one of our previous meetings, but another one of the major changes we're making to both the franchise agreement and the administrative rules is slightly changing the definition of multifamily. I believe the current definition was structured to be consistent with our planning code?
With our development code.
Development code.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. But that language is inconsistent with Metro's administrative rules and state requirements. So it puts Republic Services in a position of having to, comply with two different standards at the same time. It's really more about what minimum service is required under state law and under Metro's administrative rules. My understanding is that this doesn't change anything operationally. If we do change the definition from being, hold on, let me read it to you. So the new proposed definition is any multi-dwelling building or group of buildings that contains 5 or more dwellings on a single lot. So if you increase that number from 3 to 5, you may ask what happens to those triplexes and those quadplexes. It does turn out that there is some flexibility. I think a lot of these units are receiving residential service right now. I think Republic Services does offer the option to these customers to receive commercial service. So there is some flexibility there, but the overall goal here is to bring our code language and administrative rules into alignment with Metro's rules and state law on this issue. Did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, yeah, that's correct.
So just quickly, I wanted to point out that you may or may not notice 2 new categories of waste. The first one is special waste. This is collection that is already happening. It's just not in the administrative rules. So what we did was we took the definition that exists under Metro's administrative rules and we added that to the city code or the city administrative rules. Essentially, collection of special waste, that's not a curbside collection service. That becomes an on-call collection item under Section 9 in the administrative rules. And batteries is a new definition. There's a couple of references there. I think it's interesting. Apparently, we're supposed to tape the terminal ends. There's a risk of fire with collection of batteries. Apparently, battery recycling is a service that Republic Services is already providing to a lot of customers. There's been confusing outreach to people who live in the city of Wilsonville who now believe that battery recycling is offered. So adding this to our administrative rules just it probably makes things easier for everybody.
And I will note that some of these things that we're talking about, it's also important to remember that council will be looking at the rate review at the next council meeting. And so some of the items where we're talking about clarifying services that Republic Services is already doing, those rates will then be part of a potential newly adopted rate structure.
And I should have mentioned in the last slide, the impact of adding batteries to the administrative rules is it's now a required collection item for Republic Services under Section 3. So the next few slides go over some additional of the red lines that you'll see in Exhibit A. So the first slide really relates to Section 3.1. In the last couple of years, Metro has adopted additional administrative rules that put obligations on local governments to include some of this language in their administrative rules. So that's part of why we're making some of these changes or proposing to make some of these changes. In Section 3.1.1, you'll notice that all services must be offered on the same day. Solid waste service must be provided weekly, which I believe is already happening, but we're making that explicit. There's the new battery recycling requirement that I just outlined, and that third bullet point there, clarifications on different types of waste. We just wanted to make explicit and clarify what's already happening, which is that categories of waste like the special waste that we just talked about, hazardous waste, household hazardous waste, unacceptable waste, and infectious waste. These are all defined terms in the administrative rules, but we're making clear that these are not curbside collection items. Customers are able to call Republic Services and arrange for special collection for an additional fee, but we're just making that more explicit. There are a couple of changes to multifamily collection. A lot of what you'll see in the document is new language from Metro. They're prescribing new minimum service levels, which I believe is 20 gallons per week for solid waste, 20 gallons per week for recycling, and 1 gallon per week for glass. Just as a side note, I think something that will probably come up in conversation again is there's an enclosure issue around multifamily collection. So that's not something that comes up in the rules themselves, but it's, a related issue to think through.
I'd like to actually make a comment on multifamily, and I didn't necessarily cover, it isn't necessarily covered in the franchise agreement, but I am interested in the perspective of Republic on this, and it's specifically regarding multifamily and commercial and vermin. We're continuing to see an increase in, even in Wilsonville on the ability to mitigate vermin, rats, and things like that. Particularly with congregate apartment and food facility waste, now that food is being included in some of the recycling. Is there a reporting mechanism that Republic can lever when they see an increase in vermin, when they're doing collection or anything along that line? Because the commercial or the multifamily housing facility may not necessarily report it, and I know that it can't necessarily be written into the franchise agreement, but I think it's something that at least we need to at least have that conversation.
Yeah, and we have Republic Services here, so if council's open to it, then I'd offer for Jason Jordan, their general manager, to come speak to it. I will also say, I agree that it's not necessarily something that would be captured in a franchise agreement, but one of the things that I appreciate about the city's relationship with Republic Services is when there's an issue that comes up, on either side, there's very quick communication. We just recently had an issue with a particular customer, and it was a collaborative process between Republic Services and the city staff of like how we were going to respond to it. And that's from relationship building, not necessarily through the franchise agreement, right? So, Jason, I don't know if you have any comments on vermin.
Sure. So good evening, council. For the record, my name is Jason Jordan. I'm the general manager with Republic Services. So, Councilor General, to answer your question regarding the vermin, we actually have through our drivers program they have what's called a Connect phone system, which means they have the ability to take pictures or record video of their sites, and that gets directly uploaded to our dispatch group, and that gets tied into a customer account. So, and we actually have some cases more so. I also operate a division in Portland, which has a very large infestation of that in our small container business. And so that's one of the mechanisms we have, and we actually work directly with those customers to help solve that because of the ongoing problems there. So we have a mechanism that can work, and a lot of it just has to do with, as Anna talked about, we have a very good connection, so it's just being able to know what customers that we're looking at or what enclosures, but we have the ability to do so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And just as Stephanie noted too, on one of the things that I think Metro is trying to address with multifamily, talking about services for multifamily, is currently what happens a lot of times because there might just be a trash bin there. People put things in that maybe shouldn't go, that could go in other streams, or they're putting things outside of the bins because they don't fit in the bins. That can all contribute to those other nuisance issues. And so that's why we're continuing to have this dialogue of how do we address enclosures, how do we provide the space for recycling services and the like, if there's a desire by the multifamily customer for those services, because that could also then reduce sort of those other nuisance issues if they're properly being contained and collected and hauled away.
I'm glad you brought up the nuisance issues over all the greater nuisance issues, because I know some of that was brought up in some of the documentation that was shared with us. When it's blocked or it's not accessible or things like that, you said that your Republic is connected, so your drivers then are encouraged to call that into dispatch. What is the remediation to resolve that with the property owner?
So that's a great question, and it's very collaborative. I would say there's really a two-pronged approach right now. The way the franchise agreement and administrative rules operate right now is if a customer violates the administrative rules, the city can take an enforcement action. We also have in our franchise agreement language that assigns our rights for enforcement to Republic Services. So if there's something that, for whatever reason, maybe we feel like it's just kind of outside of what we would normally do from an enforcement perspective, Republic Services also has that right. The issue that we did have actually had to do with some bulky waste that was being collected, or that was being collected by another provider. And the nice thing with how Republic Services can document that information, especially with photographs, is they can send that to us. Then we, legal, sent out a letter to the property management company and to the owner, and essentially said, it wasn't an enforcement like you're getting fined. It was, Republic Services provides this service, please contact them to arrange for this pickup, rather than using the company that was being used. So Republic Services, generally, if there's an issue, they will also send us the photo that they receive. They'll send us a photo, and then, we can also contact the property owners. And I'll just note, because it's one of the things that makes me love working in local government, is when I was the assistant city attorney, we had an issue where some residents were putting their bins in a bike lane on Wilsonville Road, which was the same day as Wood Middle School was doing their bike program.
Oh, no.
And so pickup was happening. It was, you can imagine the potential danger of that. And the problem for the residents was their driveway was not big enough to house their bins. So they didn't really have a space for it. We worked with Republic Services and our Public Works team to clear out a little bit of some brush that was in the landscape strip. And we notified Republic Services that this is, kind of the solution we came with. We reached out to the residents and also let Republic Services know, hey, if you see it in the bike lane in the future, please remind the customers and put it back in the landscape strip. And it was a great problem-solving solution that, didn't take a whole lot of effort, and made it much safer for our community members, our students. So it was really collaborative, and one of those things where, hopefully, I haven't heard of it being an issue since. So that's the kind of thing of where you find solutions outside of maybe what the specific rules say.
I think that we underestimate the value of the collaboration between Republic and in the city of Wilsonville and all of our homeowners and residents, because it can very quickly go from really great to really bad if it's not managed properly. And as a resident of Wilsonville for over 10 years, I can tell you that I have not seen a single failure, including days when I'm like, what are you doing out here in this weather? And they were still out there doing their jobs. So appreciate that very much.
And to add on, the valet services is offered at multifamily residences, at least a few of them that I'm aware of, and I would think that would cut down the problems in front of the receptacles getting blocked with garbage. So I'm kind of wondering if that's what their experience is. Is that your experience?
I should just get up here. Yeah, actually, and just to clarify, right, our span of control comes from the time that any of that refuse or recycling reaches our receptacles. So what's happening leading up to that is really at the discretion of the property management company or the homeowner. But what we do run into is, which we'll talk with, as mentioned to Councilor Dunwell, is when we do have block containers or where bulky items either have been put in front, we first work directly with the customer. So we'll have the photo directly uploaded to dispatch. Dispatch usually reaches right out to that customer, lets them know. So we're not quite sure in terms of which actual properties have the valet service, but assuming that if those are the ones that have that, and again, we have a history tracker with all of our properties based on those Connect photos, that if we know which ones those are, we can actually research and see if that's actually been the case where it's corrected those issues.
So, while Jason's maybe there, and before Stephanie moves on, am I correct that the compact fluorescent light bulbs are only addressed in the Recycle Plus program? I mean, without having AI to look at throughout this whole document.
You're talking about the individual fluorescent light bulbs that would be bagged as part of the Recycle Plus?
The light bulbs or the fluorescent tubes?
So the fluorescent tubes, the longer tubes, we actually have a separate program for that. And I think we had piloted that with the city a few years back, where a customer can call in and we actually have a kind of prepaid box where they can insert their fluorescent tubes, whether it's the 4-foot or the 8-foot or the smaller one. So that part is separate from the curbside residential plus collection program. The intent of that is more of the smaller light bulbs.
Okay.
And a lot of that's due to the fact of their very fragile nature. So having those mixed in with everything else creates a little bit of a concern and a hazard.
But that's not the LED light bulbs.
So we're talking about basically your typical light bulbs that you're screwing in on a residential side is what we're intended for with the Recycle Plus program.
There's no market for the LED stuff.
Correct, right now. And that's, again, what was mentioned is one of our concerns with these programs is the consistency and the sustainability of end markets and making sure that we have responsible markets for those. That doesn't change month to month.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And the last point on the slide is just to say that there are changes to the required service levels for residential and multifamily, but there are no major changes for business and commercial customers. Okay, so the first point here just relates to drop-off service. I think the current language in the administrative rules is not consistent with what is actually practiced. For example, I think that it says that you can drop off solid waste and yard debris. So we've removed those references. We've talked to Republic Services just to make sure that the language in this section matches practice and is practicable. And there's some flexibility built into where we require Republic Services to notify customers once per year regarding what can be dropped off and, any changes to that. The second point here, updates to service hours. Again, no changes to the hours when commercial customers can be served, but residential service, I believe the start time is currently 5:30 a.m. and the proposed draft bumps that up by a half hour to 6 a.m. Do you remember why we did that?
Yeah, I did want to note, because I forgot to mention this at our last work session, because a community member had emailed about the start time for residential service, and so I just wanted to note, the 6 a.m. start time is actually generally the same or later than what we see in surrounding jurisdictions, but Republic Services has said that that's something that they can accommodate, especially because we're smaller and we're closer than other jurisdictions. And the other question that the community member had was about our noise ordinance that's in our nuisance code sections that talks about a 7 a.m. start time. That is specifically for construction, and so it's not applicable to what Republic Services business. So I did want to clarify that because I forgot to last time. We did make the change on mixed use customers, making that earlier because in mixed use there is a commercial component to it, and we didn't want, there's a conflict of, a truck that serves a commercial customer is generally, it's going to be like usually one of the front load trucks, and so those are bigger, and when you're in a mixed use area, usually you're looking for a more bike ped friendly environment, and there's conflict there. So we didn't want it to be a 4:30 early start like it is for our commercial and our general commercial and industrial, but a little bit earlier so they can hopefully get the service done for those commercial uses within a mixed-use development before you really see the bike and pedestrian activity occurring.
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
So moving on, I'll go over these points relatively quickly. We just added some clarification, which I think is, like, again, in the spirit of consistency with current practice. I think we've added language that says that multifamily and commercial, no, I'm thinking about something else. This first piece just says that if there's an adjustment to collection schedules because of hazardous weather, that will not result in a bill credit or a bill reduction for especially residential customers. One section was deleted because it refers to what happens to a receptacle when it's provided by a customer, but my understanding is that doesn't happen at all. So the language is no longer needed. 3.23 was duplicative language, so you'll notice that's stricken in your draft. Receptacles, there's some new language around compactors, which I think are used in a multifamily setting, industrial setting. And the final piece there's three sections, 4.9, 6.3, and 7.4. It's pretty interesting. It says that a landlord in any of these contexts has to provide access to recycling services mostly. That's language that's now required under Metro's administrative rules. And we do have similar language already in our city code. It's not as extensive as what's now required. So, the prudent approach, I think, is to add that language to the administrative rules. So now getting into some changes relating to recyclable materials. There is a more explicit source separation requirement for glass, which I'm pretty sure was the practice already, but we just made that explicit in that section. And there are some new requirements relating to commercial customers only, which again are new requirements from Metro, where Metro is saying that local governments have to put these requirements, implement these requirements. They're mostly aimed at having businesses do more to make it easier for people in their facilities to engage in recycling. So doing things like providing recycling containers in their internal areas and posting appropriate signage. Any questions about this piece before we move on? The next piece is around other materials. So this is the list that I talked through earlier. Hazardous waste, household hazardous waste, special waste, unacceptable waste. We flipped things around where we moved those terms into the definition, which is section 2.34, and collection of all of these items is subject to on-call collection under section 9, where a customer can call Republic Services, request the pickup, and they have to pay the additional fee. The fees are all set out in the approved rate schedule. Any questions about this? The next piece is yard debris. You'll notice there's a pretty big change in terminology. I think the existing administrative rules and franchise agreement refer to yard debris. The new revised term is organic materials, which is broader than just yard debris. It includes food waste as well. The distinction here is that if you look at the definition in Exhibit A, you'll see that we're saying that organic materials includes yard debris for residential customers, but not for commercial customers. That's just a practical piece because my understanding is that essentially all commercial customers do not receive yard debris service.
Is the paper new?
That's a new ad that we're putting in. But it's part of it's part of the practice now.
And there's another minor revision to the definition of yard debris that says only de minimis amounts of sod and dirt are acceptable in residential carts. That's because of a weight requirement related to the trucks. If you load up your cart with those materials, it gets too heavy, and I think it's a safety risk. So, any questions about yard debris? No? On to food waste. So you've seen this slide before. I wanted to provide it here just to provide some context and, just a reminder of how we got here. It's not a new program, but COVID derailed its implementation. So implementation is a little bit behind schedule. Ultimately, all 3 groups of businesses under this program have to comply by September 30th of next year. You'll notice right around Section 7 in Exhibit A, the proposed administrative rules, there is a lot of new language. A lot of this language relates to this service standard that comes from Metro, this requirement that certain businesses comply with the food waste program and, separate their food waste for separate collection. There is enforcement language and education requirements. I think some of that language was modeled off of Clackamas County's program, tailored to the city of Wilsonville, of course. But those are the components of this program: the requirement to participate for certain businesses, enforcement provisions. There is language in the rules around a waiver program. If a business cannot, or if it's cost prohibitive for a business to comply, they can go through this process to obtain a waiver, which allows them to not comply with the program. And then the education requirements.
Stephanie, you might want to skip this slide since we're running out of time.
And I think, so I'll just go over the changes that we're proposing to the annual franchise report. We've engaged in a lot of back and forth conversation with Republic Services to look at the existing requirement and figure out what makes sense and what is doable. I think it's Exhibit C to your staff report, you'll see the most recent version of this language. In a nutshell, we're proposing that all of the data come to the city on or before August 15th. We're sort of separating out the review of financial data, which relates to the rate review process, from operational data, which will come to you via the annual report. And we've confirmed that our consultant who helps us with the rate review doesn't need that operational data. So the 2 things can be separate. Is there anything else you would add to that?
So both the information about the rate review information and the operational information, they'll be separately provided, but they coincide with each other. They'll come at the same time. They'll sort of walk the path at the same time. So that way, when council is doing the rate review, it'll also have this operational annual report as well. So you'll basically get all the information, and we're using the same time frames for both. So you're looking at the same 12-month period for both sets of data. And I'll cover this last one because it came from our last council work session, and it's also in the staff report. This is really, I think, the one decision-making point that's still outstanding. There is the discussion about electric vehicles and whether or not the purchase of electric vehicles will be an allowable expense. Council really thought through at the last work session on 2 different options. One is to take. Option 1 is basically adding language that council can authorize the inclusion as an allowable expense, new technologies and pilot programs. The second one eliminates electric vehicles from that information and still says, okay, if there's a pilot project or new technology other than electric vehicles, then council could authorize that. So under the second option, it's basically already acknowledging that electric vehicles are current technology. They exist, they're going to be rolled out, and so they will be considered an allowable expense. So that's really the difference between the 2, is the second one really acknowledges that electric vehicles are coming and that we will consider them an allowable expense. One of the things that Republic Services talked at the last work session is and this is with a lot of its context that we don't have yet, but Jason, can you remind me what you said? Generally speaking, not including the maintenance differentials, what the electric, 15 to 25 cents per residential customer per month would be potentially the increase in cost for an electric vehicle purchase, but that's not assuming decreases in maintenance costs and the like that are also tied potentially to electric vehicles. So we're not saying there's going to be a rate increase for an electric vehicle. That's not what we're saying here. We're just saying that's a hypothetical potential. So we'd like to hear from council on these options.
I'm fine with option 2.
Am too.
Okay. Great. So we'll move forward with option 2 in the language, and then as next steps, currently what we are planning, there's a discussion about potentially not having a council meeting on November 20th. For this ordinance to be completed and be able to be effective January 1, that means that we need to do 2 readings on November 6th, and for that we need all council here. So I'd just like to double check as of right now, do any counselors know they won't be here on November 6th?
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Be here.
So we are planning to then do both readings on November 6th, potentially, and then we would have an effective date of January 1. And November 6th is also when you'll be considering or reviewing the rate review report.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions that council has?
No, just a quick comment. I did go to the bulky waste day and actually took photos, which was great. The teams were fantastic. You made it move so smoothly. It's such an asset to our community. With some of these changes that are going on, will this increase the burden of learning new processes or knowledge within our community? And is there a way, if there is, to be able to educate them of these changes before they're impacted?
Yeah, so I don't think, like, as far as bulky waste and the like, I don't think so. With some of the new multifamily recycling, yes, and Metro has put pretty stringent requirements about education for that. One of the other things that we're doing, coinciding with all of these discussion about rates and discussion of the franchise agreement, is we always do an insert in our Boones Ferry Messenger about what you can recycle. We're going to be doing more of a feature on some of these updates in our Boones Ferry Messenger tied to some of these educational components. So it'll be more robust information that we're putting out this fall than we even typically do.
Thank you.
And just as an aside, I will note that Wilsonville Community Sharon reported that they raised $3,800 in donations.
Oh, that's really
as opposed to $800 that they got last year.
Nice.
So significant from the community in
That's
terms of their
fantastic.
donations. So.
Great. Good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mayor, since you're here, do you want to adjourn the work session?
The work session is now adjourned. And we will reconvene for the regular meeting at 7:10. Thank you to Republic Services.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I didn't get to witness.
Yeah, 'cause you were reading the
You were too busy holding everybody's feet to the fire.
teal. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a teal coffee
Ready?
Yeti mug.
Good evening. I will call to order a meeting of the Wilsonville City Council on Monday, October 16th at 7:10 p.m. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Berry.
Present.
Counselor Linville.
Here.
Council President Akraval.
Here.
Counselor Dunwell.
Here.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Here. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
Your Honor, I move to approve the following order of agenda.
I second it.
The motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. I will update you on some mayor's business items, and the first one is regarding the role that all of our city councilors play in representing Wilsonville and all of our interests of our residents and businesses in various capacities in the 2 counties in which we serve and related to many regional and other interests for which we need active representation. Each one of our counselors has a couple of 2 or 3 different roles that they play in those committees. One of the committees is called the Willamette Intake Facilities Commission, and I wanted to thank Council President Akraval for serving as the lead on that for some time, and even as the chair, put a lot of time into that as we participate with Tualatin Valley Water and other communities in really monitoring the intake of water to our freshwater drinking system. At this time, we have an opportunity to change that and give a different person the chance to be the lead, and I understand that Councilor Dunwell is willing to now play the lead as our representative on the Wilsonville intake facilities, and Council President Akraval will move to the alternate position. Just wanted to let you know of that appointment. Thank you both for your time and also to all the councilors for the roles they play on other committees and commissions. Would like to update you on some of the activities that I've been involved in since we last met with our city attorney, Amanda Guile-Hinman, and our government relations director, Mark Ottenad. We had a meeting with Amelia Porterfield, who is the head of regional solutions for the state of Oregon, and she came to one of the meetings of the Clackamas Cities Group and met with all of the representatives of each of the cities in Clackamas County and offered to meet with cities who would like to discuss issues of concern, where they would like to have the state be aware and also to be able to help them out. And I raised my hand and said I would like to meet with her. So Regional Solutions, we really appreciated her coming to Wilsonville and spending a good hour with us. Just to describe what this organization is, it is a special state agency housed in the governor's office that helps to resolve conflicts or advance programs with local governments and state agencies. So we discussed a number of issues where the city and the state agency have a nexus. Couple of them I will go over. We talked about the 10-year-long land use and policy controversy that City of Wilsonville has had, along with some of our neighbors, with the Oregon Department of Aviation, and that is regarding really a list of problems that we've had with the Aurora State Airport and the representing the interests and needs of the City of Wilsonville with regard to overhead air traffic, protection of environmental interests, safety interests, traffic, and really being able to have a very appropriate representation role in the planning for that airport. So we've had numerous roles, numerous conflicts since 2012 regarding the master planning effort for that airport. So that's one of the issues that we discussed. We also discussed the bill that was introduced last year of extending the West Side Express Service commuter train, WES, from Wilsonville to Salem. And as you know, that was originally conceived as a commuter train that would go all the way to Salem, and at the time it was built, various factors came into play, and it only went as far as Beaverton. So we discussed the importance of that and all of the cities that are now lining up together to advocate for that. Another one that we discussed is the proposed merger of two large grocery chains, Kroger and Fred Meyer, as you've read, are discussing a merger with Albertsons and Safeway. And so we talked about, some of the issues that brings up to our city, if we might be left with only one grocery store, and what are the ways that cities like Wilsonville, there are others who are in the same situation, can really express our concern and find out if there's anything the state can do to free up these empty grocery stores for better use. No answer on that yet, but we filed our concern. We had a very good meeting, and I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the problems with Amelia Porterfield. I just mentioned a meeting that I go to, and also Councilor Berry is the alternate, which is called the C4. It's the cities of Clackamas County, and there are mayors and city councilors there. We heard a report at our last meeting from the Oregon Department of Transportation staff about the state's declining gas tax revenues and really actually pretty disturbing projected decrease in federal transportation funds in the next few years. And I think we heard some of that also from Councilor Dunwell about the same conversation with Washington County. And really, I think this is a really big concern. We have rural roads, highways, all kinds of roadways that are in serious need of maintenance. And unless we get some federal support, we're going to see really bad declines of those roadways. You heard from the city manager a few minutes ago about how the bulky waste day was a success, and I think you might have also heard the report from Republic Services that they had almost 400 vehicles that participated in bulky waste day, which was about a week ago. 54 tons of bulky waste like mattresses, old furniture, refrigerators, washers, dryers, and more that are going into the right place. They're not going by the side of the road. Participants were asked to donate cash or gift cards to Wilsonville Community Sharing, which is our local affiliate of the Oregon Food Bank. They also do a lot of social service assisting, helping people in need with, in the Wilsonville area with utility support and so forth. The total donated by the people who attended Bulky Waste Day was $4,000 combined cash and gift cards to Wilsonville Community Sharing. Really appreciate that. If anybody missed it, Republic Services is hosting another Bulky Waste Day on Saturday, October 21st for residents of Lake Oswego, Tualatin, and Wilsonville. And at the October 21st event, they will be collecting toys for tots. And we have details on the city's website. Just this last week, from Wednesday to Saturday, I and other city council members attended the annual conference of the League of Oregon Cities. It was in Eugene. It was just a really good opportunity to attend a lot of in-depth educational sessions, network with other councilors, mayors, and subject matter experts, and you'll probably hear more about that from the other councilors. We all went to different sessions. I went to the day-long session on housing, which was really interesting, talking about different ways of funding affordable housing in different parts of the state, and really underscored the need to develop our construction workforce. We also had a presentation on 3D printer-made houses. There are some that are being made in Burns, of all places. They have a real shortage of, it's a long way to go to build in remote areas, and so this may be a solution. And And we have two big events coming up in October. On October 21st, Saturday the 21st, is the annual Harvest Festival, and there are lots of fun things to do there, lots of tables, activities for kids and adults. We even have horse and carriage rides, face painting, free pumpkins, the famous story time with the Wilsonville Public Library staff, and we have over 20 craft vendors. So that is held in Upper Memorial Park near Murasi Plaza from 10 to 1 at the Stein Boozier Barn on October 21st. On October 28th, we have Shred Day. I think we mentioned this at our last meeting. This is the chance that you can bring by your confidential paperwork, sensitive papers, and drop it off for shredding from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at City Hall on October 28th. This is really important. We've heard our police chief talk about everybody's need to protect themselves from crime and keeping your documents confidential and disposed of properly. So this is a way to get rid of documents confidentially with Shred Northwest and the city's annual Shred Day event. And then also on October 28th, and I hope to see all the counselors there, is our Emergency Preparedness Fair. We have quite a few articles in the Boones Ferry Messenger that our staff have put together with a lot of great details. This is also held at the Stein Boozier Barn in Upper Memorial Park from 10 a.m. to noon, and it's really a great way to just get in there, figure out what you can do to make yourself and your house and neighbors ready to go in the case of a disaster, whether it's wildfire or some other natural disaster. It pays to be prepared, and this is a really easy way to get ready. We have our Wilsonville Ready campaign that is also described on our website, and this is where you can find out how to access power, water, food, medical aid in the case of an emergency. And finally, I'm going to get some water here. I have the opportunity on October 25th to go to the Oregon Biotech Summit. And this is being held at Twist Bioscience, which manufactures high-tech, a number of high-tech products and synthetic DNA, as well as high-tech computer chips that are used in research and development of all kinds of things from medicine to medical research devices and even fertilizer. So it's really great having Twist Bioscience host this event. They'll have a number of different industries there, and it's another chance to really congratulate our staff and council who a few years ago developed this recruitment tool that is called a Wilsonville Investment Now, and that was a way to help recruit Twist Bioscience to Wilsonville. And they have made a $100 million plus capital investment now in this Wilsonville facility, and they have hundreds of jobs. So really commend the prior council for developing that. Thank you for that. And I think all of us have met some of the employees at Twist Bioscience who previously worked in lower paying jobs and have just found great opportunities right here in Wilsonville. In front of me are two awards that the city has recently received, and these are from the Oregon Economic Development Association for Excellence in Economic Development. The first one is the award for Business Development Success Story for the recruitment of Twist Bioscience. And the second one is the award for Urban Renewal Project of the Year. And this was the Wilsonville Investment Now strategy, which is helping attract businesses. And the big success is Twist Bioscience, which I believe was the largest economic investment in Wilsonville and in the region in 2021, right?
Correct.
So I'm sure that the council joins me in congratulating our city staff for your diligence and attention to innovation and getting all the amazing resources together to be able to receive such an important award. We currently have the great fortune of having Matt Lorenzen as our Economic Development Manager, and previously Jordan Vance, who set up and administered this WIN program. So thank you to all of the people in the city staff who helped to do that. Sorry, this is kind of a long mayor's report. We're almost through. This year is the 35th anniversary of the sister city relationship the city of Wilsonville has with the city of Kitakata, Japan. And we just really want to recognize that. The original signing of this occurred in October 17th, 1988, by Mayors Bill Stark and Yoichiro Lino in the Wilsonville City Council chambers. And the intent of this agreement, which remains the same today, 35 years later, was to deepen the understanding and friendship between the two cities through programs in fields of education, culture, and the economy. And this was run by a prior locally based nonprofit called the Wilsonville Sister City Association, which held student exchanges and business exchanges between the two cities for 32 years. Former Mayor Tim Knapp led the effort to bring that group into the city and make it a sister city program in 2020, and created the Kitakata Sister City Advisory Board. So we had a break in the exchange during COVID, of course, but last year we did have a group of exchange students, and this year we will have another group. It'll be 13 students, ages 12 to 15, and 2 chaperones. And they will stay in Wilsonville with local host families from October 28th to November 5th of this year. And I'm enthusiastic about being able to, with my husband, host one of the chaperones, and he works for the Aizu Kitakata International Association. And I know some other counselors have hosted in the past. The group will visit local schools and take a number of day trips around the region, including visiting local farms, Silver Falls State Park. And I also want to add that we have been ceremoniously, very enthusiastically invited by the city of Kitakata to celebrate the 35th anniversary by going to Japan to visit them and celebrate this important anniversary. And so members of our city council will be going to Kitakata next year for that celebration. When I had the opportunity to visit over Zoom with the mayor of Kitakata and the head of the Chamber of Commerce there a couple of years ago, and they told us that they had recently built a new school in Kitakata, and they developed a theme for the school, which I think was something to the effect of, students of the world. They wanted their high school students to really celebrate global education, and they credit all of those years of coming to Wilsonville for that effort. So thank you to everybody who's helped with that. And in closing, I will let everybody know that our next city council meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 6th at 7 p.m. And that brings me to just a minute here. Oh, I have another item. It's not over. Okay, let's go into chapter 2. So this is short. I wanted to formally announce, as you read in the paper and heard in the media, that I declared a local state of emergency that allows the city to deal immediately with the recently discovered infestation of Mediterranean oak borer beetles. And to recap, this is a newly discovered, really dangerous pest attack that primarily attacks white oak trees that are in stress or otherwise in some state of decline. And once infested, these trees succumb quickly, it appears. There are other trees that also seem to be at risk, and the city is working with the Oregon Departments of Agriculture and Forestry to remove and incinerate infected dead trees and to seek a safe pesticide treatment. So as we heard in an earlier meeting, you can't just cut them down and leave them there, or you take them camping for firewood. Everything that the scientists know about this, shows that the wood needs to be properly incinerated. And so this emergency declaration allowed us to work with the state of Oregon to bring in a gigantic incinerator. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Just, Mayor, as part of our emergency operations plan, it is required for the city council to ratify the declaration of the state of emergency, so we'll need a motion to ratify that declaration.
Thank you. So may I have a motion to ratify the declaration of state of emergency for the Mediterranean oak borer, which I believe goes for 1 year?
It goes until the end of the calendar year.
As she said.
I move to ratify the declaration of state emergency for the Mediterranean oak borer response, which concludes December 31st, 2023, unless it is extended at that time.
I should clarify, it technically expires at 5 p.m. on December 29th, which is the Friday before.
29th, okay.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
The motion's been moved by Council President Ackerval and seconded by Councilor Linville. All in favor? Or any discussion?
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So the incinerator, where's that located, and how long do we get to use that?
It's gone.
Oh, it's already gone?
Yeah, maybe Chris Namsey wants.
Chris has been the point man on that. He can come up and give you a briefing on that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald, members of City Council, Chris Namsu, Community Development Director. The incinerator is a new device that the Department of Agriculture purchased. The very first time it was operated was a week ago, last Monday, when they mobilized at the future site of the Advance Road Community Park, a 10-acre vacant piece of property that the city owns right next to Meridian Creek Middle School. We mobilized that machine on Monday morning. We were successful in burning a considerable amount of wood the first day. The second day, we ran into significant wind and rain. If you recall, we had a pretty big storm that came through. The separation requirements for this device are critically important, that it be far from structures and far from the pile of wood that you're actually burning. So we had equipment and machinery bringing wood from a stockpile site on the property to the incinerator itself. Department of Agriculture had a staff member who stood out there all day long, and the incinerator burns. And we just feed it and put logs in and kind of do that day by day. And then it has to cool down in the evening. So there was this whole process of having to cool it down, and then the process of having to bring it back up to temperature the next day. So they lost a day and a half out of the 4 days that we were planning on operating the incinerator last week. Got a full day of burning in on Thursday, but we were cut short on Wednesday and lost half a day on Tuesday. The machine is now headed to Forest Grove, where it's going to be exclusively burning ash trees that are infected by the emerald ash borer, and it's our hope that we can get this device back in Wilsonville in the winter over Christmas break for as much as 2 weeks, so that we can continue the operation. In the meantime, staff continues to try to investigate appropriate ways to dispose of this infected wood, which we're looking at a landfill in Hillsborough for what is called deep burial of the debris, of the infected debris, as well as bringing material potentially to the Covanta cogeneration plant in Brooks. So we're coordinating and have meetings with staff at Covanta to see if we can deliver covered truckloads of infected wood that they could then burn for electric production and stuff that they do down at that particular factory. So Brian has assigned a 6-team member, a staff member. I'm on point for that particular group. We're meeting weekly and preparing a plan, a response plan, logistics, communications, expenses, and the like that we'll be delivering to the city manager's office this week. So bringing you up to speed.
So in the interim, people are discovering infected trees. and then cutting them down, and then where are they being stored until they can be disposed of properly?
Well, that is a great question that there's not a lot of really excellent answers to, which is why we are trying to investigate all of these disposal methods. None of these disposal methods are cheap. These are small pieces of property. These trees are incredibly large. One way to treat it is to leave it on a site and cover it with plastic for as much as a year and allow the visqueen plastic to essentially bake the bugs that are within the wood of the tree itself. So simply stockpiling it and covering it with plastic is a perfectly legitimate way to dispose of the wood, but you have to leave it there for a very long period of time. If you don't have that, we're trying to figure out all these other options so that we can assist our citizenry with reasonable solutions for disposal that don't involve carrying truckloads of this wood down I-5 where the bugs can just jump out and find more oak trees. So
because the disposal's just as important as discovering where they're located in the first place, right?
it's very important. The disposal is critically important. So a lot of work is being done on that. We don't have all the answers at this point. Many more answers are going to be coming forward over the next few weeks as we continue to try to discover this. We feel a sense of urgency that our state partners don't feel because they deal with this stuff every single day, and there are so many pests and things that Oregon is encountering, giant longhorn beetles and stuff that you can't even believe. So we're really working hard to try to figure it out, and there's just steps that we need to take and before this plan is finalized, and I think we'll have a lot more information here over the next several weeks. In the meantime, we're trying to provide the best guidance that we can to citizens that have oaks that they think are infected. We're working with arborists across the community, and we continue to find infected trees in our landscape. Regularly, we're finding more and more.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work on that.
I do have a quick follow-up question. When you said that you're identifying more and more trees, then is there a protocol for notifying the landowner or homeowner not to do anything with that tree, like cut it down and throw it and recycle?
Yeah, our focus is still largely on the public trees, if you can believe that. I mean, we're not quite to the point that we're in people's yards where we see an obvious dead tree. We're going to make communication with those folks and have those conversations. We're finding it, we're just observing it, and as the trees are dropping, we're running out of time to observe it more, frankly, because the leaves are gone. And as of tonight, they're probably pretty close to all gone after the storm we had today. So, now it'll be a matter of monitoring the trees where we did make application of insecticide and fungicide, and then we want to be able to do some documentation, and we're working with Bartlett, who the council met, and Lyle Failmeyer, and his team and his firm. They're really a company that advances the science. They've got a nationwide presence, they've got laboratories and doctors and entomologists, and they want to figure this out. What is the fungus? What's the best treatment for the fungus? What can we do collectively across this country to try to stop this insect from really decimating oaks all over the place? So that's a very positive aspect of it, is that science is being advanced, and these observations and when we applied it and what level was the tree infected and did it do any different, make any difference or not, those are all things that will be documented as we go forward and become the playbook under which we operate as we go forward.
Does the borer become dormant in the wintertime?
They say that it does become somewhat dormant, yes, but they say that this time of year it's actually emerging from the trees and looking for a new host. So they exit the tree and they can fly as many as 3 miles.
Oh my gosh.
So, and what we're seeing in the wood, for example, at the stockpile site where we were burning last week, I mean, you just grab any piece of wood and you just can see extensive infestation throughout the black chambers and galleries where they burrow and lay the fungus for their offspring. It's extensive. And I mean, I'm a science geek, so I find it kind of all interesting, but it's really incredible to think the size of these trees. The ones that we're seeing that are in significant decline these bugs have been here for a long time. This did not happen in the last 2 years. I would venture to say it's been 5.
And it's the females that fly.
I'm not sure. I don't want to start talking too much about the bug because I'm just not quite at that level.
I believe that's the case.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Following our discussion now, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to our communications part of our agenda, and we do not have anyone for communications. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so what about citizen input and community announcements?
I see none in the chambers. Do you have any on Zoom? We have none.
We had that picture that was sent to us, but that's not,
They didn't come.
okay. We'll go do that for another day. We thought we were going to have some students. That might be at another later meeting. So that brings us to councilor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements, starting with Council President Aukervall.
Thank you. Most recently, I, as the mayor discussed, also attended the LOC conference, the annual conference this last week in Eugene, and appreciated several of the different sessions that I was able to attend, and a number of them, 2 of them, were on public engagement and community engagement. One presented, it was quite interesting, a concept of using lottery panels to recruit representative groups or populations from a community in order to give policy feedback and engagement. So that was an interesting thought, and had been applied on a different scale than Wilsonville community is, but it's great to just hear different approaches and new ideas from, you know, all sorts of communities across the state and further. Since our last council meeting, I also attended the Wilsonville Child Care Consortium meeting, where we gathered and will continue to meet with child care providers in the state, and in the city. And I appreciate and thank State Rep Neron for also joining that meeting and getting some excellent feedback from child care providers within Wilsonville. I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium meeting, and one point to note from that meeting was that there was a new, or revised, I should say, revised consortium IGA that was presented and passed by the consortium members. However, the next step is now to send that revised IGA to all the member councils. So that would mean our city council, for approval by our city council as well. So I think we have a number of months before this needs to be completed. I believe it's June, but it'll be something that'll come forward to this group in the coming months. And coming up, I will be attending on Wednesday. I'll be attending the Wilsonville Urban Renewal Task Force meeting as we continue to look at the concept of having an urban renewal area within the town center, which this council has been discussing and having updates on, and we will continue to have that as that work moves forward. And just, I appreciated the mayor's comments about the exchange students and the group that will be here in our city here at the end of the month, and just encourage everyone, if you see the exchange, you know, the exchange students group, in years past, they've been very active in Town Center Park, helping plant a tree, or, you know, local businesses and the schools. They've done tours of our schools, and I imagine their itinerary will have similar activities. Just how meaningful and nice it is to have welcomes from community members, because this is a huge event for those students and, you know, visitors that are coming to do this. And of course, we want to represent our city as a very friendly and welcoming place that appreciates and values having that exchange. So, and that is it for me tonight. Thank you.
Councilor Linville.
Thank you. On October the 4th, I attended the Opioid Settlement Board, and we identified as a group 6 allocation categories, and strategies are being developed at this point to within those categories, and at our next meeting, we in all likelihood will approve the strategies that right now we're getting, everyone's putting in input into those strategies. But the allocation strategies, categories, are health equity, harm reduction and overdose prevention, treatment and recovery, prevention, research and evaluation, leadership planning, and coordination. And one of the things that I wanted to be sure that that was included was the education component. And so those strategies are under harm reduction, and hopefully there will be monies made available to both communities and educational organizations. On the 11th of October, I attended an overflight demo presentation where actually the city is contracting to get data about overflights over the city of Wilsonville. And although I think Charbonneau is one of the communities of interest, mostly because as the flights come in, their altitude lowers at that point. But we're also getting
Yes, I've gotten
communication.
several emails this week from the Canyon Creek neighborhood.
So it is a city of Wilsonville issue, and it appears that Mark Ottenad is kind of heading that project up, and we're looking at quadrants within the city for which we can collect data, and it'll be actual rather than reported overflights that
That are outside the standard that has been put down, basically.
Right. So we're going to talk more about that and continue to work on it. I as well went to the LOC conference, and one of the sessions that I attended that I thought was pretty interesting was the whole issue of the use of artificial intelligence in governments. And as much as we don't, that seems like things in the future. We are using it every day when we go on our phones and do a Google search. That's artificial intelligence. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting was that one of the presenters talked about his position as a developer and trying to interface with the City of Portland development code. And the notebook on the shelf was this thick. And one of the things that AI would allow our developers to do is to do searches within that document to be able to get to the codes that they are concerned about without having to scroll through on a computer or to look through a book. So I think there are some really good applications. They did give some of their warnings about using AI and not recognizing that that becomes public information, and that it also goes into this cloud of what becomes public. So I think there are some opportunities for us, and they actually gave a list of resources of 20, I believe it was 20 different applications that cities are using at the current time that are AI-based. On the 26th of October, I will attend the Clackamas Cities Association dinner that's in Gladstone. So I'm looking forward to that. Those are really actually pretty informative events. And then I also will have a Greater Portland, Inc. Small Cities Consortium meeting, I believe, that week as well. And I will attend the welcome breakfast on October 30th for our Kitakata student representatives. So that is my report.
Thank you. Councilor Berry.
So let's see, on Thursday, October 5th, I also sat in on the C4 Clackamas County's meeting, and then then I got to attend my second League of Oregon Cities conference this past weekend, so Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I just really appreciate getting to take the time to attend, to learn from a lot of different really great speakers and to network. And because it was my second one, now I'm recognizing other people outside our city. So I really enjoyed that. I thought the keynote speaker, Bill Strickland, was really wonderful. He talked about how he grew up in poverty in Pittsburgh, and he met a high school teacher. He just happened to be walking down the hall. He dropped into this classroom. The teacher ended up mentoring him and encouraging him to go on to college. He said, "What do I need to do to get into college?" And they said, "Take the SAT." So he takes the SAT test and fails, but he was able to get into the university on probation, and then he learned and was able to get onto the dean's list. Eventually, he got his master's and his PhD. But what he really did that was of value is that he went back into his community and he was able to build hope and dreams and community centers for high school students to learn vocations and to be able to come back and contribute to their society. And I was so impressed that that evening I went home to my room, and I downloaded his book. It's called Make the Impossible Possible, One Man's Crusade to Inspire Others to Dream Bigger and Achieve Extraordinary. And I recommend anybody read that. Another session that I really enjoyed was the Lane County Fire Training and tour of their training center for their fire department, which I thought we were going to one building. It turns out it's actually a campus, and we got to tour the 911 call center, so that was exciting. I really enjoy these conferences, and I want to participate every chance I can get. There's so much to learn when you're on the council. It's just a great opportunity. Let's see, this Wednesday, on the 18th, I'll attend the C4 Clackamas County Subcommittee. And then also on the 26th, the next Thursday, I'll be attending the Gladstone dinner. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's what I have on my calendar so far.
Wonderful. Councilor Dunwell.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. Today was busy, actually. I attended the Washington County Coordinating Committee monthly, or I think it was semi-monthly, meeting, and the focus of the presentation was regarding looking at low-income solutions for tolling. And I'm really pleased that Dwight Brashear is also participating on the, I think it's the Equitable Committee tied to the tolling. So to make sure that all of our community is treated properly, and there was also follow-on discussion regarding that if this isn't carried out properly, there will be a mass exodus to the secondary roads. And that those individuals that are least likely to be able to afford to pay that toll will be those that will most quickly make that move. And not only is it not great for the community and it can extend commute times, but it also increases danger overall. More traffic, more accidents. So we'll see where all of that goes, but I'm really glad that even though Washington County isn't directly impacted by the I-205, their potential tolling in the I-5 right away, they are highly interested because they believe, and ODOT did not disagree, that there is a model being created statewide that would be implemented that could potentially be applied to 217, 26, and other highways. So they are very seriously taking the future impact, and I think that the the fact that we've got so many other counties that aren't necessarily going to be directly impacted, taking such a high level of interest in this is extremely important for us. The other thing was I was allowed to give a really great update on some of the projects that we have going on too within our city. Spoke to regarding Beckman Road and everything that's happening with the new bridge, but also the impact of what is going to be happening on Stafford. And that obviously has an impact on Washington County citizens. The other thing that kept my day very busy today is the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Coalition met today. And the genesis of the potential legislation that's going up to make it a national heritage area requires obviously a comment period, and there was a discussion at length regarding the proposed changes to the language by the Siletz tribe. So it was a very active conversation, and I will give you additional feedback as that moves forward. All of that being so important, when you get to do something really fun in the middle of it, which I did, because I did not attend the LOC conference, but what I was able to do was be at the ribbon cutting for the Wilsonville Story Walk. And tremendous credit should go to our Library Foundation, our Parks and Rec Department, our public library for creating this walk that's actually in our new park in Villebois that walks you through all of a storybook that is meant for young children. But it also has a greater meaning, which can apply to all of us. It's about collaboration and getting along and unity and all of that. And we had a special speaker, Odessa Agarwal, who did a fantastic job. How old is Odessa? I'm not sure. 12. She's a 12-year-old member of our community, and she did an amazing job. So I was very honored to be able to be present at the help cut that ribbon.
Thank you. So that story walk is available. It's an outdoor installation of pages of books in Tivoli Park.
That's correct. And very well done too. That's a permanent, it's a permanent installation. So they can change, my understanding is they can change the books. They will cycle through, but the actual stands that they're on are permanently placed. So it was a tremendous partnership among a lot of different groups to make this a reality.
Well, thank you. Very active council. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to our consent agenda. If our city attorney would please read it.
Resolution number 3017, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing an intergovernmental agreement for the Frog Pond primary site infrastructure between the City of Wilsonville and Westland-Wilsonville School District. Resolution number 3023, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to enter into the Third Amendment to Communications Site Lease Agreement with New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, and minutes of the October 2, 2023 City Council meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second?
I'll second.
The motion has been made by Councilor Linville and seconded by Council President Agarwal to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. I believe that brings us to our city manager's business.
I was going to give you an update on MOB, but I think Mr. Namsu covered that adequately,
Okay.
so.
Well, thank you for pointing that, it's just, you bring together a cross-department group to cover these issues that we had no idea were coming before us, and I know you can't do magic, but it sounds like you're going to have all hands on deck to do the best possible.
We are.
Thank you. Legal business.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
All right. That, I adjourn our meeting at 7:59 p.m. And we will now reconvene for the executive.